Pablo, your response, or your take, rather, on the president meeting with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I don't deny anything that Deneen is saying, but I will say that one thing that makes me uncomfortable is that the one follow-up item that really seems to have come from the meeting with regards to the election meddling is that Vladimir Putin and Mr. Lavrov have both requested that we give them evidence of their hacking. This is something that obviously the intelligence community has agreed upon, that they were trying to influence our election, or at least meddle in it. I don't see that there's any art in that deal if we're not coming at it from a position of strength where they need to offer us something in return as well.
You know, on that note, I'll have to point out that Charles Krautheimer, on Special Report with Bret Baier just on Friday, went on to mention that we should be suspicious of anything that Vladimir Putin says and does.
Absolutely.
Alluding to the fact that this is a former KGB agent. Deneen, I'm concerned about, or your concerns about that in terms of what Charles Krautheimer had to say.
Well, sure, it is very concerning. But you know what? I think what should be investigated are the Democrats and the DNC. I mean, listen, the DNC refuses to turn over their server to FBI to be investigated. What about John Podesta and his business dealings with Russia? And what about Loretta Lynch? And was she involved in any way, shape, or form with an email trail? And then there's also Hillary Clinton selling the uranium to Russia. So if anything needs to be investigated, I think they need to start there.
But what about Vladimir Putin, Pablo?
I mean, that's what I'd like to investigate further, is how foreign countries not only might have influenced or meddled in our election last year, but more importantly, what safeguards we have in place to make sure that our election, the integrity of our elections, are secure moving forward. I think that relitigating the past is something that is going to go on, and a lot of media outlets are seeing that as red meat. But there is a much more important thing at stake, and that is the integrity of our American democratic processes that we use to choose our elected officials.
Well, listen, Putin can't be trusted, but Kelly,
Absolutely.
Don't forget, President Obama, former President Obama, was given intelligence information about Russia, and he did nothing about it prior to the 2016 presidential election.
All right, and now let's get beyond the investigation, because the investigation has proven that there's so far no collusion or obstruction of justice. But let's move forward with what these two gentlemen, or these two world leaders, had to discuss, not only talking about what took place in American politics, but also with regard to Syria, the de-escalation of the violence that we're seeing there, as well as a ceasefire. Can we trust Russia to validate a ceasefire and enact a ceasefire, because they've done it in the past and they've not been beholden to their pact for a ceasefire? Pablo?
Well, I mean, I think that Deneen and I can both agree that the Russians played Obama pretty hard in Syria. I'm not sure that we can trust them, but we should move forward with anything that we can do to bring the terrible situation in Syria to a halt. And if a ceasefire is something that is in Russia's general interest, it's certainly in our interest and in the world's interest, because what's going on there is just so heinous and sad.
Right.
And we do have the moral obligation to end.
Deneen, I got to give you a real quick response to that, real quick.
Well, yeah, going in, President Trump said he wanted to work with Putin, and they did agree on a ceasefire. We'll see how long it lasts.
All right.
Exactly.
We'll continue to follow the developments and hope that hopefully they'll maintain that. Pablo Manriquez, Deneen Borelli, good to see you both. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, guys.
You too.
It is the annual running of the bulls in Spain, an annual tradition I will never get. And for America.